Dr. Stapleton, such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Eleni. It's my absolute pleasure.
There's so much incredible work, all your research in EFT. And one of the things that fascinates me is one part of that research is bringing EFT into schools. And you've brought EFT into schools on all levels. Why is it that you decided to do that?
Yeah, and look, it probably was one of those things that we weren't planning necessarily, but did emerge. So lots of our food craving and weight loss research had resulted in a lot of media. And of course, in the media, we talk about that, tapping can reduce that stress response and anxiety, and food cravings being a bit like an anxious kind of, urge, that kind of thing. And so locally, a whole range of school teachers had heard some of those media reports and reached out to us and said, look, we have these academically advanced students in our, classrooms, and we're finding that they're really anxious and they're really perfectionistic, but they really worry about failing, even though they're academically advanced. And they said, would you say EFT tapping can help with that? And of course, the answer was yes. The next question they then said was, could you come in and teach? So we kind of didn't have it on our wish list, but of course, it has evolved into becoming quite a worldwide thing at the moment, where we did end up running several clinical trials, research trials in many schools around that were close to us here in Queensland. Of course, published all of those results. And then as a result of that, lots of teachers worldwide kind of saying, how can we learn to use tapping, particularly for classroom settings? And of course, that then led to the development of Tapping in the Classroom, which is our online signature program just for teachers around the world. So yeah, it was one of those, it probably was meant to be, we just weren't looking for it. But looking back, my whole family are teachers. So sisters, mother, extended family. So I'm like, teaching is in my blood. And it probably was just one of those meant to be sort of moments in time.
How would you summarize the how part of introducing it to students? Because it's something that students can sometimes go like, this is weird. I don't want to do this. I'm too cool. Like, how do you kind of.
Yes, I absolutely can relate, because particularly when you go in with 15-year-old boys, male students that sort of look at you like, what is this, tapping on your face? We quickly learned that the easiest way to build a bridge, particularly for that age range, small children, absolutely fine, take teddy bears in, do things like that. But the teenagers, we found that by showing them videos of more cool people than us doing tapping, and for example, racing car drivers, baseball players, football stars here in Australia do tapping. And we had footage of all of those kind of famous people doing tapping. And by showing them and sort of saying, look, other people do it. We're not just the ones coming in saying, here, tap on your face, you'll feel better about your exams. It kind of allowed us to build a bridge there to something that perhaps would have been much harder. And funnily enough, during one of our trials, went for 5 weeks. In the middle of that trial, there was a massive football game that was aired online in Australia at that time. And we were due in the next day to this classroom, and I hadn't watched the football, not something I kind of sit down to very regularly. And the boys came up to us and said, did you see the football game last night? And we're like, no, not really. And they said the captain of one of the teams was tapping on the field before kickoff during the national anthem to relax himself, and they knew what it was. And I was just like going, oh, thank you, to my lucky stars, because it really helped that situation. So we now have, if anyone listening kind of goes, oh, what's some of those videos? They're all on my YouTube channel. So just Peta Stapleton at YouTube. All of those videos there, Olympic runners tapping, football stars, the one I'm talking about, baseball players, car racing. They're all there in the public space, so that it's much easier to say, hey, here's somebody that is doing tapping and, they're achieving great things. You can be like them as well. So that's actually how we did it.
Is there anything else you'd like to add in terms of the how before we move on to the results you've noticed from it?
No, we really just found that, even if a couple of students sort of took to it and found that it really had an effect, they tended to share it with their friends and their peers. And we even got feedback that some of the other teachers that weren't involved were asking them, hey, what's that thing that you're learning in that research trial? And they taught the teachers in other classrooms. So we just find sometimes you just need one or two champions in a peer group that will spread it and kind of go, no, this is pretty cool. One other how that we did use in one other school was they were older. So they were 16, 17-year-old students about to graduate. We taught them how to use tapping for goals. So how to have a goal come true. And we know obviously in the tapping world that what you do there is set the goal and then work out what are my doubts and what are my tail enders that are telling me, this goal won't come true. And of course, then we tap on them. They didn't know that, but all they knew was they had a goal. And by using this technique, potentially the goal was going to come true. And we did go back and follow up and found out that had happened. So that was a really lovely bridge as well. Rather than coming in saying, we can help you reduce stress, we came in and said, anyone got a goal that's just never come true, but you really want it to, we can show you a method that might help with that. So that's another how that did work with that older age group as well.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I'm curious then, what have you noticed in terms of results with the little ones, with the older ones? Are there any differences type of thing, or is it kind of pretty much the same across the board?
Yeah, it does depend on what you're measuring. So in our groups that were those academically advanced students, we ended up with over 200 students that were about that age 15, went through that trial. And we measured things like, academic resilience, self-esteem, those types of strengths and difficulties. And then, of course, that fear of failure, because that's what the teachers had said. These students are really bright academically, but they had this worry about failing or disappointing their parents. So we measured all of those things. All of those things actually responded to the tapping. So they got 5 weeks worth of tapping. So they all significantly improved, including resilience, their personal strengths, but fear of failure was the biggest outcome there. 6 months later, we did do a follow-up. They were about to finish their school year, and those gains stayed. So those students absolutely maintained those outcomes, which is pretty similar to what we see in most tapping trials, EFT trials. Now, with the little ones, what we tend to do there is we teach the teachers how to do it before a spelling test or, learning times tables, that type of thing. And the teachers started to tell us that not only did the students, if they forgot to say, let's do some tapping before the test, the students would remind them, but they started to track their grades and said that their grades were starting to improve in the much younger years, like, 7 and 8-year-olds, those types of things. So we get that feedback from the field, if you like, just by asking teachers to tell us. So, and it works right through. University students have been studied in many, many EFT trials and same kind of outcomes. Fear of public speaking has been looked at many times, that level of performance. I'm currently supervising a PhD student who's looking at EFT for music performance anxiety, so singing in public. Same kind of thing, that really reduces the anxiety. And of course, you then get the outcomes and they forget it was ever a problem. So that's usually what we hear.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, I had a conversation with a mother a few weeks ago who said, is it possible for my child to overcome panic attack? And it's like, there's people who still don't know that these tools exist and that there are solutions. But in the past, sometimes people felt it was a life sentence. You just kind of live with panic or live with anxiety. But actually, we can bring the stress down and cortisol levels down. And as you say, in your book here, if people haven't read it, the science behind tapping, they'll buy it. Brilliant. It goes through, all of these studies in detail. And you see, we actually have more power at our fingertips than we ever imagined possible. You're bringing the science to it so that people can be like, oh, okay, it's not just I feel better. Now I understand the science behind it, which is what you talk about in your book. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm wondering, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any other kind of on the horizon things that we could look out for? If people also sign up to your newsletter, I highly encourage them to do that because you always, like informing whatever new research is out on all sorts of topics, chronic pain, it's coming out soon, just very exciting, tapping, helping with that and other topics. So yeah, anything else kind of
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, listeners do want to just jump on our mailing list either at petastapleton.com or evidence-based-EFT.com is our training website. We do release all of our clinical trials that are free for people to join in, and we do have 2 worldwide ones coming up at the moment where, again, people can be anonymous or, just do. One of them is a single session EFT or tapping for forgiveness. So having a look at, maybe someone that's hurt you and doing a single tapping session for that. So that'll be open to everybody. And we're replicating Dr. Carol Look's EFT for eyesight. So a lot of emotion being held in eyesight, and of course, people wearing prescription glasses. So that will be a 2023 trial. So again, jump on. All of our research trials are free to participate in. And we've had lots of anecdotal feedback that people are able to wind back their prescriptions for glasses. So there are kind of our passion projects that are happening at the moment. And certainly we support teachers worldwide that do tapping in the classroom, and we have an online community for them as well, so that we can help, spread, like you said, literally in our fingertips, spread the ability to instantly reduce stress and worry in our bodies and in our mind. So all for teaching children as young as we can.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stapleton. Thank you so much for your time, the incredible work you're doing. Very exciting, very inspiring. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.